wait a second, what's this? A car review that doesn't have a game controller in it, or a loading screen, or some pixelated graphics? Well, no, this is something pretty different here on the channel. In fact, this is officially the first ever real-world car review that I've done, and what a vehicle to debut with. And speaking of that vehicle, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Westerly BMW. It's a dealership group. I've linked to their website in particular where I picked up this car. They gave me the use of it for a day to check it out, really get my thoughts out there as far as how this car feels on the street, and also to have enough time to really think about it, to experience it, and to get all of the necessary footage, of course, for the review. Now, the purpose of these reviews is going to be considerably different to what I do when I review a car in a game, because of course in a game it's not as realistic. I mean, it's not real life, so by definition, but it goes deeper than that, because when we talk about a car in the game, you talk about how fun it is, you talk about how fast it is, the kind of lap times it can do, the kind of value for money it has, because a lot of those things do still apply even in a game. However, those things don't apply so much in the real world, and what does apply is the stuff which doesn't, somewhat ironically in the inverse of a game, in real life, the practicality. And of course these reviews aren't going to be totally about, oh, how many miles per gallon does this thing get, or how much trunk space does it have? Of course not. The purpose of these reviews is, in the vast majority of cases, to see what these top tier vehicles from BMW and various other manufacturers feel like in the real world, on the street, not in the perfect lighting conditions of a car show, not in the abstract lap times around the Nordschleife, but actually in real world conditions, on less than stellar roads, tight city streets subject to speed limits and the same rules that every other Ford Focus, Vauxhall Astra and Volkswagen Lupo would also be subject to. Because it's all well and good having some 800 horsepower hypercar, but if you can't even turn a corner because it's 7 feet wide, or tear the chin splitter off as soon as you try and go through a drive-through, it's not much use. And it's not even about whether or not you can afford to fix it. It's purely the inconvenience. So how does this car feel in the real world? Well, as I said, I had a considerable amount of time to experience the i8, to get an all-round view of what it can do, the kind of kit that it has, and the first thing that strikes you about the car is definitely the style. And this is something which you simply cannot experience from a review or from a game. This is one of the reasons why Goodwood is such a great car show, because when you actually see these vehicles in person, in the metal, if you will, it's such a different experience to seeing a photo or a video. You get no idea of the real scale and presence of these cars when it's just in a game. And of course that's something which you can't really change. In real life, I've got to say this car is amazing to look at. The presence, the fact that it's big by general sports car or even city car standards, but relatively compact by supercar standards actually. It's perfectly proportioned, and that's coming from a guy who's 6'3", about as wide as most door frames, and I still fit in it perfectly. Now I will say the only caveat to that is that for bigger guys like myself, if you are actually looking to get one of these, I would probably recommend the Roadster that I was driving here rather than the Coupe, because for one thing, I always prefer the open-top versions of exotics anyway. I think they look better, but in particular, it's the headroom that will often be an issue, and in a Roadster, it simply isn't. Now, of course, if you put the roof up, it could be, but on a day like this, which was great for filming, great for driving, it was perfect. I love the open-top aspect. Many of you guys know how much I love buttresses in a car's design, and for those who don't know, that's those two humps behind the seats. You see it on stuff like the Mercedes CLK GTR road car, a number of others. I think it looks stunning. I love that design aspect, and there are so few cars that actually have it, even open tops, so I love that they incorporated that into this one. Now, in terms of spec, it's a pretty unusual car compared to a lot of others. It doesn't have, 700 horsepower and 0 to 60 in 2 seconds and cost £1 million or anything like that. It's actually surprisingly modest when it comes to spec. But the reason why that modest spec is actually very impressive is because not only does it have lower numbers, and of course will therefore be, chances are, more economical than most supercars, it's what it can do with those lower numbers, because a car that can do more with less is easily more impressive, and there are tons of examples of that from motorsport, from supercars, from cars in general. So for instance, this car has 370 horsepower, and yet it's faster to 60 than the 414 horsepower E92 M3 was, and the 500 horsepower V10 engined M5 was. Those are both iconic BMWs, and yet this is comfortably quicker than both of them, despite being rear-wheel drive still. Now, that 370 horsepower is definitely complemented by 420 pound-feet of torque. And that is what does most of the lower end stuff for you. For instance, when I was driving this car through city streets in particular and small twisty town roads, it was predominantly in electric mode, full electric. Now you're looking at about 30 to 35 miles of range in its peak efficiency. It can drop to around 20 if you push it a bit harder, but usually you're looking at up around 30. And around the city, that's perfect. It's completely responsive, there's no lag whatsoever, and of course that's one of the biggest advantages of any electric vehicle. But on the other side of things, because it's not a full EV and it is a hybrid, with that very interesting choice of a 1.5 litre 3-cylinder engine in the back, it means that when you do give it the beans and that engine kicks in, not only does it have the performance that you would want, with 0 to 60 in like 4.6 seconds and it's speed limited to 155, which, let's be honest, is more than enough, it actually sounds like you would want a car like this to sound as well. And it's not some audio recording of an engine, it's a legitimate petrol burner behind your head, but with all of the advantages of a hybrid, and arguably without the disadvantages. It's a car that manages to show that being forward-thinking and environmentally conscious can still be very much so impressive, eye-catching, stylish, and very cool. This car turned heads literally everywhere I drove it. There were all ages, from 10-year-old kids on their bicycles at the side of the road, up to middle-aged people, to retired people. Everyone looked at the car as it was driving past, and if you can get a car which is even just in white, which isn't exactly the most flashy of colours, it wasn't like the two-tone BMW colours or anything like that, just white, as you could see. If even a car in that relatively understated colour can still grab everyone's attention, but not just attention, it captures the childlike attention. And that's something which I always love in a car. And again, you see this at places like Goodwood, where people go back to being about 10 years old when you see this amazing car and think, wow, look at that, that is so cool. There are some cars which don't do that. There are some cars in the exotic sector which grab your attention and then you think, oh, look at that guy. The i8 just doesn't do that. It's a car which looks futuristic, it's sensible at the same time, it's genuinely forward-thinking, and of course BMW has always been trying out stuff like electric integration, hydrogen integration, various other things, and this is a tangible form of that. It's in a production sense, it's on the street, you can drive it, and let's be honest, it looks like the kind of car which would technically still be a concept at some motor show, and yet it's legitimately on the road. That alone gives me a ton of love for the car, because most cars that go from concept to the street will more often than not lose a lot of that flair. And although sometimes, of course, that can't be helped, I think BMW did an excellent job, a genuinely excellent job of having all of that kind of flair and style and imagination capturing that a concept car would have, and actually getting it to the street. That happens so rarely that it really does need to be appreciated. The kind of performance that it gives you, combined with the fact that you can run 35 miles to the gallon, combined with the fact that for a guy who's 6'3" and not exactly small, I still fit in the car perfectly. It's spacious, the legroom, the width room, headroom perhaps not so much on the Coupe, but I can't say for certain because I haven't driven that one, but in all general senses that you would want from a Roadster, there's more than enough room. It felt fantastic to drive, it's smooth, there's no roll through corners whatsoever, and it's practical. It's genuinely practical. It's not the kind of car where you put up with city life just to get it that one day of the year out onto the track to really enjoy it. This is not like that. This is a car that's designed very specifically to be as enjoyable driving at 30 or 40 miles an hour on electric power as it is giving it the full beans from the full hybrid 370 horsepower system. And it does an excellent job of that. And it's not even that I'm just saying that for this review. I believe I've even mentioned on the channel far before I ever drove this car, probably years ago in fact now, that I love the i8. I was waiting for them to make a Roadster, I was hoping that they would, and it was instantly pretty much my favourite Beamer probably of all time. And that's saying quite a lot, because there are some great ones, including Le Mans winners. The E30 M3 is of course a legend, but I think for me, the i8 Roadster in particular might just be my favourite Beamer. And the fact that it is genuinely clever, it's packed full of tech, and even a car like this that weighs 1,570 kilos yet it doesn't feel like it does. If you were to tell someone, or ask them even, how heavy do you think this is based on how it feels, you would easily guess maybe 1200, 1300 tops. So the car does an excellent job of feeling lighter than it is. It's far more compact than most supercars would be. You're talking easily 6.5, 7 feet wide for most. This is no way near that, but at the same time it's spacious. It's not a car that's packed out with soundproofing and safety tech to the point where you can't even fit in the thing. It feels like a perfect balance. And I think that the proportions of the car are probably one of my favourite things about it, along with the gull-wing doors. They're pretty cool too. But overall, I love the experience of driving this car. Special thanks once again to Westerly BMW, and I hope to work with them again in future, and that is, at this point at least, a very real possibility. So, of course, stick around on the channel for more reviews, not just of cars like this, but from hopefully a variety of other brands also to come. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.